7 years after the first playground exchange, Commander Elena Ward received an invitation she never expected. High Merchant Velcor wanted her to visit his homeworld. The message contained only one unusual sentence. "You should see what your playground started." When Ward and Daniel Mercer arrived, they expected laboratories filled with experimental human equipment. Instead, they found thousands of alien children. The enormous public plaza had been transformed. Monkey bars stretched between artificial trees. Swings hung beneath crystalline towers. Climbing walls surrounded enormous spiral slides. But these were no longer exact copies of Earth's playgrounds. The aliens had adapted them. Four-armed species had rotating climbing frames. Low-gravity species used enormous jumping platforms. Winged juveniles practiced controlled falls before opening their wings. Velcor stood beside Ward, watching hundreds of children play. "The first generation raised with controlled adversity is reaching adolescence," he explained. Mercer smiled. And Velcor handed him a scientific report. The results were extraordinary. These children showed significantly greater willingness to attempt unfamiliar problems. They recovered from mistakes faster. They collaborated more easily after failure. Most surprisingly, they were becoming unusually inventive. One young alien had already redesigned a broken climbing mechanism instead of waiting for an adult technician. Another had constructed a completely new game from discarded equipment. Ward looked around. "So you turned playgrounds into schools?" Velcor shook his head. "No." "They did." Then a loud metallic crash echoed across the plaza. Ward instinctively turned. A section of climbing equipment had collapsed. Several children jumped backward. Nobody was injured. Before maintenance robots could arrive, 4 young aliens gathered around the damaged structure. One inspected the broken joint. Another collected fallen components. A third began suggesting repairs. Velcor watched them proudly. 7 years ago, they would have called an adult. The children began rebuilding. They are learning something our civilization forgot. Ward watched the young aliens argue, experiment, fail, and try again. "What?" Velcor smiled. "That sometimes the world doesn't need to be perfectly designed. Before you begin, then an emergency alarm suddenly sounded across the city. And this time, it wasn't part of the playground. Every light in the plaza turned red. The children stopped playing. Velcor's communicator activated. "High Merchant orbital transport failure. A passenger shuttle has lost primary stabilization." Ward looked toward the sky. A silver transport was descending above the city at the wrong angle. Its engines were still operating, but the vessel was rotating slowly. Mercer checked the emergency display. "The stabilization system isn't correcting the roll." Velcor's expression tightened. "There are 83 passengers aboard." Emergency control attempted to connect with the shuttle's automated guidance system. No response. Then a young alien standing near the broken climbing frame looked upward. "It's swinging." Ward turned toward him. "What?" The teenager pointed toward the rotating shuttle. Like the pendulum course, Velcor froze. The boy had grown up using alien versions of human swings. He understood something. Instinctively, that the automated system was treating only as mathematics. Momentum. The teenager grabbed a maintenance tablet and drew a simple pattern. "Don't fight every rotation," he said. "Use one." Mercer immediately understood. The shuttle's thrusters were wasting energy trying to stop its movement completely, but if they fired at the correct point during the rotation, they could redirect that momentum. Ward transmitted the idea to emergency control. Seconds later, the shuttle's side thrusters fired. Once, the rotation slowed. A second burst changed its angle. Then the main engines ignited. The shuttle leveled out less than a kilometer above the city. Across the plaza, everyone watched silently as it reached the emergency landing field. Safe. Velcor slowly looked at the teenager. "You saw the solution because of a playground?" The young alien shrugged. "You taught us not to panic when we lose balance." Ward glanced toward Velcor. Neither of them laughed this time. Human playgrounds had never contained gravity manipulation technology. But 7 years after the galaxy's most ridiculous trade agreement, one of their simplest lessons had just helped save 83 lives, and news of what happened was already spreading beyond the Merchant Council. The rescue transformed an old cultural curiosity into a scientific obsession. Within 3 days, Recordings of the shuttle incident had reached dozens of inhabited systems. Researchers focused on one detail. The young alien who suggested the maneuver wasn't an engineer. He wasn't a pilot. He was 17 years old. And when reporters asked where he had learned to think about unstable motion, his answer confused half the galaxy. On the swings! Suddenly, delegations began arriving on Velcor's world. They weren't interested in purchasing playground equipment anymore. They wanted to understand the human philosophy behind it. Commander Ward found herself standing before representatives from 23 civilizations. One scientist asked the question everyone had been avoiding. Did humanity intentionally design childhood recreation to create adaptable adults? Ward almost laughed. No. The room became silent. Then who developed the system? Millions of parents, children, teachers, builders, and communities over generations. That answer disturbed them even more. There had been no central scientific program, no government directive, no secret military experiment. Human culture had simply discovered that children needed opportunities to explore physical limits. Mercer stepped forward. A playground doesn't teach a child exactly what to do when a spacecraft loses. Stabilization. He displayed footage of the rescue. It teaches something more basic. He paused. When the expected situation changes, don't freeze. Observe what is happening, adapt, and try something. Several alien researchers immediately began taking notes, but one representative remained unconvinced. Director Saul of the Keth Dominion stood. His civilization was famous for eliminating uncertainty through predictive, artificial intelligence. This philosophy is inefficient, Saul said. Failure wastes time. Ward looked at him. Sometimes? Then why tolerate it? Before Ward could answer, Velcor did. Because a civilization that never permits small failures may eventually encounter one failure too large to understand. Saul said nothing. At that exact moment, thousands of kilometers above them, a Keth Dominion vessel detected an impossible navigation error. Its predictive intelligence attempted to correct it. The correction failed, so it repeated the same solution, again and again. Each attempt pushed the vessel closer to disaster. The Keth vessel was carrying 211 passengers. Its navigation intelligence had encountered a sensor contradiction near the planet's upper atmosphere. According to one system, the ship was drifting left. According to another, it was drifting right. The artificial intelligence selected the statistically safest correction. When that failed, it recalculated, then selected almost exactly the same correction again. Director Saul stared at the emergency display. Why isn't it choosing another solution? A Keth technician answered quietly. Because every alternative has a lower predicted success rate. Commander Ward understood immediately. The system wasn't malfunctioning. It was obeying its design perfectly. It had been built to avoid bad decisions. Unfortunately, every available decision now looked bad. Give the crew manual control, Ward said. Saul looked horrified. They aren't trained for uncontrolled decision-making. Mercer turned toward him. Then today is their first lesson. Communication opened with the vessel. Ward spoke directly to its captain. Stop trying to find the perfect solution. The captain hesitated. Then what should we do? Find one that gives you another chance. The crew disabled predictive navigation. For the first time in their careers, they were operating without an approved solution. Their first maneuver failed. Warning alarms screamed. But instead of freezing, the captain adjusted. The second attempt reduced their descent. The third stabilized the vessel. The fourth established a safe orbit. When confirmation arrived, nobody in the chamber spoke for several seconds. Director Saul slowly sat down. His civilization had spent centuries teaching machines and citizens to avoid mistakes. Humanity had developed something different. Not a love of failure, not recklessness. The ability to fail without surrendering control of the next decision. Velcor looked toward Saul. Now do you understand the playground? Saul watched the rescued vessel on the display. Yes. Then he asked the question that would eventually change Keth society. How quickly can you build one? Ward smiled. Depends. Sal looked confused. On what? Do you want the swings too? 6 months later, Commander Ward stood on the Keth Dominion's capital world. It was the safest place she had ever visited. Every road was monitored by predictive systems. Every building automatically adjusted to prevent accidents. Transportation routes changed before congestion could form. Even walking paths illuminated exactly where citizens should step. Nothing was left to chance, and almost nobody looked happy. Director Saul led Ward and Mercer toward the Dominion's first human-inspired playground. It was beautiful. It was also completely useless. The monkey bars automatically lowered whenever a child struggled. The climbing wall moved handholds closer if someone missed. The swings slowed themselves before reaching uncomfortable speeds. If a child began losing balance, hidden stabilization fields immediately caught them. Mercer watched for several minutes. Then he shook his head. "You removed the entire point." Saul looked offended. "We improved the design. You eliminated failure." "Correct." Ward walked toward a young Keth child attempting the climbing wall. Every time the child reached upward, the next handhold automatically moved into perfect position. There was no uncertainty, no difficult choice, no reason to adapt. Ward turned toward Saal. "Turn the assistance systems off." Several Keth officials immediately protested. Saal hesitated. Then he gave the command. The stabilization fields disappeared. For the first time, the children faced equipment that wouldn't help them. One child reached for a climbing hold, missed, dropped safely onto the padded floor. Every Keth adult gasped. The child stared at the wall, then climbed again. He missed the same hold, fell again. On his third attempt, he changed his approach. Instead of reaching directly upward, he pushed sideways, used another foothold, and climbed around the obstacle. Mercer smiled. "There." Saul frowned. "There what?" "The lesson." Soon, other children began experimenting. Some failed. Some invented completely unexpected routes. Others started helping one another. Within an hour, the perfectly organized playground had become noisy, chaotic, and unpredictable. Director Saul watched in disbelief. Then something even stranger happened. The children began creating their own game. Nobody had programmed it. Nobody had approved its rules. And nobody could predict exactly what they would do next. For the first time in generations, uncertainty had returned to Keth childhood, and the children were laughing. The experiment was supposed to last one afternoon. It continued for 3 weeks. Every morning, hundreds of Keth families arrived before the playground opened. Parents who had initially protested now stood behind the barriers, watching their children climb, fall, argue, cooperate, and invent increasingly strange games. Something unexpected began happening outside the playground, too. Teachers reported that students were asking more questions. When classroom experiments failed, children stopped immediately requesting automated assistance. They tried different approaches first. Some even challenged instructions. Director Saul found that development considerably less enjoyable. "They're becoming difficult," he told Ward. Ward smiled. "They're becoming curious." Then the changes reached adults. Keth engineers began experimenting with solutions their predictive systems ranked as unlikely. Artists abandoned algorithmically optimized designs. Young scientists proposed research projects with uncertain outcomes. Most failed. A few succeeded spectacularly. One experimental propulsion team discovered a new method of distributing reactor heat because an engineer tested an approach the Central Intelligence had assigned only a 4% probability of success. The Keth government became nervous. For centuries, their civilization had treated unpredictability as a defect. Now unpredictability was producing innovation. Saul finally understood the distinction humanity had been trying to explain. Failure itself wasn't valuable. What mattered was having an environment where failure was survivable, enough to teach something. That evening, Saul joined Ward at the playground. A group of children had constructed an obstacle course using movable platforms, ropes, and discarded climbing equipment. "Is this safe?" Sal asked. Ward examined it. "Mostly." Saul looked alarmed. "Mostly?" Before he could object, one child attempted the course. He reached the final platform, lost his balance, and dropped onto the padded surface. He remained still for 1 second, then laughed. His friends helped him up. Immediately, another child attempted the same route using a completely different strategy. Sal watched quietly. "I think I finally understand humans." Ward raised an eyebrow. "After one playground?" "No." Sal looked toward the children. "I understand why your species keeps entering places where everyone else sees a reason to stop." High above them, an incoming message suddenly appeared on Ward's communicator. It came from Earth. Humanity's first inertial-dampened exploration ship had completed its trials, and Earth was preparing to launch it farther than any human vessel had ever traveled. The ship was called Endeavour. It was the first human exploration vessel built around the inertial-dampening technology Earth had originally acquired for playground blueprints. Commander Ward returned home for the launch. Velcor came with her. So did Director Sal. Neither wanted to miss the moment when humanity finally used the technology that had started the strangest trade agreement in galactic history. The Endeavour was unlike previous human ships. Its engines could produce acceleration that would once have been impossible for a crew to survive. With inertial dampeners operating, however, most of those forces could be controlled. Velcor studied the vessel from the observation station. How far are they going? Daniel Mercer displayed the planned route. Beyond the Perseus boundary. Velcor became silent. No Merchant Council vessel had crossed that region in more than a century. Unstable gravitational fields made navigation dangerously unpredictable. Director Sal looked at Ward. You selected your first destination deliberately. Of course. You could test the ship somewhere safer. We already tested the ship. Sal frowned. Then what are you testing now? Ward looked toward the stars. Us. Hours later, Endeavour entered deep space. Everything performed perfectly until the vessel reached the boundary. Then gravitational readings changed. The navigation computer produced 3 contradictory routes. Captain Marcus Hale studied them. One promised safety but required retreat. Another offered a narrow passage through the disturbance. The third contained too many unknown variables to calculate. His crew waited. A century earlier, most civilizations would have chosen retreat. Hale smiled. Take the narrow passage. The Endeavour accelerated. Gravitational forces twisted around the ship. The dampeners compensated. Then a massive distortion appeared directly ahead. The planned route disappeared. Warning alarms filled the bridge. There was no approved solution. No calculated safe path. Captain Hale stared at the chaotic sensor data. Then he said something that made Ward laugh when she heard the recording later. All right, we missed the first bar. He leaned toward the controls. Let's grab the next one. And Endeavour plunged deeper into the unknown. The gravitational distortion struck Endeavour harder than anyone expected. Navigation markers vanished. Automated guidance attempted to calculate a new route, but every solution exceeded accepted safety limits. Captain Marcus Hale disabled it. Manual navigation. His first officer stared at him. Captain, through that? Unless you found another universe. The crew moved immediately. One officer tracked gravitational shifts. Another controlled the dampeners. Hale handled thrust. They attempted their first maneuver. It failed. The ship dropped violently toward a gravitational current. Nobody panicked. Reset, try again. The second maneuver failed too, but this time they learned something. The distortion wasn't random. It moved in repeating waves. Hale watched the pattern. Stop fighting it. The bridge became quiet. It was the same principle an alien teenager had once recognized while watching a damaged shuttle rotate. Use the motion. Don't waste energy resisting all of it. Endeavour reduced thrust. The gravitational wave caught the vessel. For several terrifying seconds, humanity's most advanced exploration, ship deliberately surrendered part of its trajectory to a force nobody fully understood. Then Hale gave the order. Now, the engines fired. The dampeners surged. Endeavour rode the gravitational current around the distortion and shot into open space. The alarm stopped. Then the forward sensors detected something impossible. Stars, thousands of them. The Perseus boundary wasn't a dead end. Beyond it lay an enormous region, hidden from conventional navigation by gravitational interference. And at its center, a stable star system. An unexplored world orbited inside the habitable zone. For several seconds, nobody on the bridge spoke. Then Hale laughed. Send everything to Earth. Hours later, Ward received the transmission. Velcor stood beside her as the first images appeared. Humanity had crossed a boundary other civilizations had avoided for generations. Not because humans possessed perfect technology. Their technology had failed too. They had crossed because when the first solution didn't work, they tried another. Velcor looked at Ward. Your playground philosophy has reached interstellar space. Ward smiled. No. She watched Endeavour approach the unknown world. the playground was just where we practiced. The discovery beyond the Perseus boundary changed Interstellar politics almost overnight. Every major civilization requested access to Endeavor's navigation data. They expected to find a revolutionary algorithm. Instead, they found dozens of failed calculations, improvised maneuvers, manual corrections, decisions made with incomplete information. To many alien scientists, the mission logs looked terrifyingly inefficient. To High Merchant Velcor, they looked familiar. He returned to Earth and asked Commander Ward to meet him at the same playground where everything had begun. 7 years had changed the place. The paint was newer. The rubber flooring had been replaced. But the monkey bars were still there. Children still climbed them. Velcor watched a small boy reach for the final bar. He missed, dropped safely, then immediately climbed back onto the platform. "There," Velcor said. Ward smiled. "You finally see it?" "I saw it years ago. I simply didn't understand how far it could go." Daniel Mercer joined them, carrying a message from the Galactic Exploration Assembly. The Assembly had approved a joint expedition into the newly discovered region. 20 civilizations wanted to participate. More surprisingly, they wanted human officers involved in training their crews, not because humanity possessed superior mathematics, not because humans had stronger bodies, because humans had demonstrated an unusual ability to continue functioning when the plan stopped working. Velcor looked toward the playground. "Our civilization spent thousands of years trying to remove uncertainty." Ward nodded. "Humans try that too. But you never completely succeeded." Thankfully, a child nearby slipped from the climbing frame. His mother checked that he was safe. Then, instead of pulling him away, she allowed him to try again. Velcor watched carefully. That tiny decision suddenly seemed more significant than any starship. The galaxy had originally believed humans trained children to conquer gravity. They had been wrong. Human children weren't learning to defeat gravity. They were learning what to do after gravity won. Ward looked toward the evening sky, where Endeavor's discovery was already inspiring another generation of explorers. Humanity's greatest advantage had never been avoiding the fall. It was knowing that falling didn't necessarily mean the adventure was over. 1 year later, representatives from 20 civilizations gathered on Earth. They had come to celebrate the launch of the first joint expedition. Beyond the Perseus boundary, the new vessel carried human inertial dampeners, Keth predictive systems, Merchant Council propulsion technology, and scientific instruments contributed by species across the galaxy. But before launch, Velcor requested one unusual ceremony. He brought the expedition commanders to the old playground. No speeches, no military parade, just monkey bars. Director Sal looked at them and smiled. "You cannot be serious." Velcor removed his ceremonial coat. "I am completely serious." Commander Ward laughed. One by one, some of the galaxy's most respected officers attempted the playground equipment that had once terrified their diplomats. Some crossed the monkey bars. Some fell. Kethra managed 6 bars before dropping onto the padded ground. Velcor reached only 4. The humans applauded anyway. Then Velcor stood and looked toward the children playing beside them. Years earlier, his people had offered priceless technology because they believed those children were performing advanced gravity training. They had been wrong about the technology, but perhaps they had accidentally been right about the training. Not training for war, training for life. The ability to encounter something difficult without immediately retreating, to fall without believing the fall was permanent, to laugh at embarrassment, to learn, to adjust, to reach again. Hours later, the joint exploration vessel lifted from Earth. Ward watched it become a point of light. Mercer stood beside her. "Still think we cheated them?" Ward smiled. "We gave them monkey bars, and they gave us the stars." Above them, the vessel accelerated toward the Perseus boundary. Behind them, a child slipped from the final bar. He landed safely, stood up, climbed back onto the platform, and reached again. The galaxy had once mistaken a human playground for a gravity manipulation training facility. In the end, everyone discovered something better. Humanity had never learned how not to fall. Humanity had learned how to get back up, and that was the technology the galaxy had truly been missing.